Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to cruise a little smarter. I'm your host, Lake, and I'm joined by my co-host, Christy. Christy, how are you today?
I'm a little crazed. How are you, Lake?
I am doing pretty good. We're recording pretty early for us today, so lots of getting up and getting ready, but we have a great episode, a really unique itinerary that I'm excited to talk about.
Every episode, Lake, every episode you're excited to talk about. Although this one I think you actually wanted to book, so I really think this has an extra level of excitement.
That was the point I was going to make. When we did this release, this was the cruise that I was like, this looks really cool. I really think I want this to be my Europe sailing for that year. And spoiler, we're not talking about my cruise. It did not, but I have an exciting cruise coming up to talk about. But that leads us into our guest, frequent member of the show. I love all of the episodes he's coming on and done. He always does such a great job. Patreon member and really just a great friend of the show. We would like to welcome Bryan back to the show. Bryan, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I was going to say I'm excited. Happy DCL itinerary day. We're recording when they drop the new itineraries, which is always an exciting day. But we're going to also talk about a really cool past sailing, which I'm excited to discuss.
Absolutely. And Bryan, real quick, why don't you just give a quick synopsis of your DCL and cruising background? I know you've been on the show a few times, and then we will jump right in because we've got a lot to dive into here.
Yeah, I always tell people I had sworn for years I would never set foot on a cruise ship, had zero desire to cruise. Then we did our first DCL cruise and I quickly changed my tune. This sailing we're talking about today would be our 8th sailing with DCL. We've been on all of the original ships, the Magic, Wonder, Dream, and Fantasy, and this was our 3rd sailing on the Fantasy.
And what sailing did you book?
So this was, Europe's been a bucket list for us for quite some time. We've sailed out of a number of different ports, but this was inside the US, but this was our first time sailing out of Europe, and we booked the repositioning from Barcelona to Southampton, which is, a once-a-year itinerary, and was absolutely incredible.
What drew you to booking this sailing opposed to, booking a med sailing or booking, Northern Europe or Norwegian fjords, something that was going to be a round full circle cruise?
I think there were two things. Number one, the dates worked out well for us. We wanted to do something in July if we were going to do it. Number two, the repositioning cruises tend to be a little bit better value because there's some complexity around the airfare. So if you look at the costs per night, it's a little bit better. And then I have always wanted to go to Spain. And the idea of not returning to the same port, meaning you get to see more of Europe, was also really appealing to us. That's what led us to book.
All really great points. Yeah, this is such a cool cruise because you get some cruise ports that Disney does not sail to very often. Again, maybe once a year on this repositioning sailing. And also, yeah, that repositioning is a pretty good value for a European sailing.
And value is important for everybody, but especially if you have a larger family. Bryan, who are you traveling with?
Yeah, so we took all my kids. So that's all 4 of my kids. We had a 17-year-old, a 15, a 13, and then my youngest son was 9 when we started and turned 10 in Barcelona, a birthday he probably won't soon forget. My wife also had a birthday on this trip, so we got to celebrate birthdays in Europe, which was a unique and fun experience.
So we're going to stick with basically planning this trip for just a little while. Pretty large family, and on top of a pretty great cruise, you had a pretty extensive pre-stay in Europe as well, bouncing all around. What was your thought process on how you booked this trip and where did you go?
Yeah, so once we booked the cruise, the biggest concern I had, and one of the nice things, you book a Disney cruise and you put it down, you always have the ability to cancel. One of the big fears I had is, am I going to be able to make airfare work for my family? And now we booked this on opening day. We had lots of time to save and prepare and earn miles and all those sort of things. From the get-go, I wanted to get a direct flight to Europe. And for us, out of our home airport, that means flying either to Paris or to London were the two main choices. And originally, I thought we'd end up going to Paris, but my wife really wanted to spend time in London. And as things evolved, we realized, hey, we need to do our touring around Europe on the front side because we're going to need to date-wise get back right after the cruise. And the flights to London were looking good. We got some really good advice from Christy, which was to look at doing a Delta vacations package because we're big Delta Airlines. We wanted to use Sky Miles, but if you book one of their vacation packages, you pair it with at least 3 hotel nights, you can get a discount on the airfare and you can still pay with miles. And you put down a deposit and you don't have to pay in full until like a month out, which was huge. That gives you that much more time to save, that much more time to earn miles. And so that ended up being a huge benefit for us for the trip. But it also kind of, that airfare kind of locked us into, okay, we're gonna fly into London and we're gonna fly out of London. And so we're gonna have to figure out how to get to London, from London to Barcelona. Very early on, I did some research and saw we could take the TGV from Paris to Barcelona. And as a kid, I was way into trains. I was raised with a dad who was into trains. And I had this book as a kid that talked about the TGV high-speed rail in France. And it was always on my list of things to do ever since I was a kid, to go ride that train. And so when I saw that might be an option, that was like, okay, we're gonna do train in Europe. So if we get to London, then that means we could take the train through the channel to Paris, and then we could take the train from Paris to Barcelona, and I could knock off a couple bucket list items. And so that's kind of how the whole trip evolved. It took time. All these things didn't open at the same time. Like airfare was the first thing after the cruise, and then trains didn't book until a lot closer to the trip. But that kind of structured things. Once we decided the transportation, everything else just kind of the puzzle pieces had to fit into place.
How did you help keep all that planning organized?
Yeah, it's a good question. I had lots of spreadsheets. I am a spreadsheet person. So we had spreadsheets, and one of the things I had to start thinking about, because you book your airfare, that's kind of constrains things, is how many nights are we going to have in each city? What are we thinking about hotels? And the trains were actually the last thing to book, but I kind of locked myself in a little bit on train schedules. I looked at how they generally ran, but then we had to kind of hope, okay, I hope when those go on sale, we'll be able to get the train at a price that works, because I didn't have a lot of flexibility at that point, because I had figured out, flights and hotels and had an idea of how many nights we wanted to do in each location. But it all ended up working out. But yeah, there was a lot of planning. This was a trip that I spent a lot of time putting together. I love that. So it was a lot of fun. But, I say this was an adventure by dad. That's what I told my kids. We did an adventure by dad. If you don't want to do that planning, you can do Adventures by Disney or something else, and they'll figure it all out for you. But I thought it was a lot of fun, a lot of YouTube video watching. I actually spent a ton of time on Google Maps, because I just have no concept of where things are in Europe and even within the cities. And Google Maps can be a great way to just browse around. Hey, here's this hotel. What's around it? What restaurants? What activities? What does public transit look like? I spent a ton of time on Google Maps to help plan.
Yeah, before I do any trip when I'm going, especially to like a city, I will play on Google Maps and look for the things I want to do. And then I highlight things as, want to do, highlight things as on the plan, like these are booked. And then it's nice to just be able to open up the app and say, okay, what are we near here? What is, going to be our circle for the day? Yeah, Google Maps can be really a great resource to help keep you on track through the day.
Absolutely. And you hit something I did do to organize too. You can create your favorite lists, and you can like favorite places and then store those in Google Maps. So we definitely did that as I watched YouTube videos. Oh, this is a good restaurant. Oh, this is an interesting shop. We didn't get to hit all of them, but I could go pull up on my map what's around here that I had marked previously.
Awesome. Well, anything else kind of pre-planning before we get on your flight and get into the trip?
No, I think we'll hit on some of the things we did. We did have a good Facebook group that had some good information. There is also, for Europe sailings, a more general, that's not sailing specific, Europe Facebook group that has a lot of good content. So we did join that group in addition to our specific sailing Facebook group. One thing that's unique about these sailings is you'll often get a lot of people from Europe in the Facebook group, and obviously they often have a lot more experience. And so that was nice. We had a lot of people from the UK on our sailing. We could ask questions about London too, or about Europe in general. And that's one nice things about those Facebook groups, especially for Europe, where you can get some people that live over there to give you their take on things.
Yeah, cruise-specific Facebook groups are great, but I really think the Europe ones are like next level in the wealth of resources, things like doing visas if necessary. Like there are some really fantastic cruise groups for the European sailings. Like I would say those are like almost a must, whereas some of your Caribbean sailings you could go without.
Or at least Bahamian or something.
Yeah.
I guess the only other planning thing is I did use all the different tour sites. So I looked at Viator, I looked at Project Expedition, which is one that Christy recommended. I also book some stuff through tours by locals. So I think all those different tour sites are great resources to go see what's out there. And some of them you can book on multiple places, and others, may only be available for one location. And then sometimes you see something on one of those big tour sites, and then you can go find a direct vendor to book with as well, which we did for one as well, and that was really good.
Well, let's get into it. Your first city on this stop is London. We obviously cannot get into every little detail. We've got 3 amazing cities to talk pre-cruise before we even get onto the cruise. So what were some highlights in London?
Yeah, let's start real quick with arrival, and probably worth talking about managing jet lag with a family. So 3 things we did that I think really helped us. Number one, we did start shifting my kids' sleeping schedules 3 days before the cruise. So we started making them go to bed early and get up early. The getting up early helps them go to bed early. And so by the day of the cruise, we were getting up at 4:30 a.m. to try and have them be a little bit more on a schedule and have them ready to go to bed when we got on the plane so that they could get some sleep. That actually worked really well. We did not have jet lag issues. We were going to get in right around, we were supposed to get in around 10. It was delayed. We got in around 11 a.m. to London. And so we just planned that first day to stay up and spend the day touring and go to bed at a normal time. Other good jet lag advice. The other thing that was really cool is even though we booked this as a vacation package, because we booked it through Delta, our tickets were in the Delta app. And one day before the trip, I was browsing and I saw we were able to upgrade to Comfort Plus for a really reasonable price. It was like $50 a person for an international flight to upgrade to Comfort Plus. So we did that, and that extra room on our way there was so great. Everybody got a little bit better rest and arrived more rested. We did not do that on the way back, and we noticed the difference. So those are some quick tips. If you can make it work, a little extra space on the way to on an international flight is great. But getting into what we actually did in London, arrival day, we took the Heathrow Express into London. Now, that's the fastest. It's also the most expensive. But here's the thing. If you're 15 and under, you're free on the Heathrow Express. So half my family was going to be free. And if you book tickets in advance, you don't have to pick what time. You just say, this day I'm going to take the Heathrow Express. They're significantly less expensive. So it ended up being like £66 for all 6 of us to travel on the fastest, I would say most comfortable way to get into London. Now, the con with that is it goes direct to Paddington Station, no other stops. So then, unless your hotel is right there, you got to figure out how do I get from there. And we had thought about the tube, didn't want to do it with luggage. So we just took a cab from there to our hotel. Now, in theory, you could take a cab all the way in, but it was very hot in July and cabs are not air conditioned in London. And so I was very much happy that we had a shorter cab ride, and I think it worked out really well, and we didn't have to fight traffic getting into the city. So that's my tip on potentially getting into London with a big family. We stayed at the Citadines Trafalgar Square, which was kind of like an apartment hotel. This was booked through our Delta Vacations package, and we had a 2-bedroom hotel room that could accommodate 6, which was nice. It was very European. It did not feel like an American hotel, but we loved it. Great service. It was in an old historic building, and our room was we had this narrow spiral staircase. It was on 2 levels, so it was kind of different, but it was a lot of fun. And then in terms of what we did in London, we went to the London Eye the first day. London Eye is cool views. My kids really wanted to do it, but be aware, you do have to wait in line, even though you book a specific time. We had like a 45-minute wait, and my kids were not really thrilled of the wait in the heat. So that was a little bit of maybe not the best thing to do when you first arrived and are tired.
And it's expensive so waiting in line is shocking to me.
Yeah, it was busy. They warn you because they have a more expensive ticket that bypasses the line. But I was like, we'll be fine. I just didn't expect 45 minutes, but it was fine. You get some incredible views. It is a touristy thing. If you like that sort of thing, I think it's worth doing once. I don't regret it. I just think, it's also a pretty long ride. So my kids were pretty tired by the end. It was not the ideal keep you awake maybe activity. Yeah, so the next day we did the British Museum. And my tip for that is it's free for tickets, but you can get times in advance. And when we walked over, Google Maps took me to the rear entrance, which is a standby entrance that had really long lines. And then they're like, oh no, you've got a prearranged time. Go around to the front, which that's a huge museum. Walking around the block to the front is quite a walk, but then we walked right in. So get a time and go to the front entrance is my tip. That museum is massive. We did not want to do it all. Like you could spend all day there. It wasn't going to work with my kids. We just kind of wanted to see the highlights, and especially where the tickets are free. We went and saw the Egyptian exhibit, which is pretty unique. They have a lot of things you won't see elsewhere. We saw the Rosetta Stone, and I think the British Museum is cool. If you're there in the summer, it is also not air conditioned. The larger galleries, they have big fans. Larger galleries aren't too bad, but some of the smaller ones were pretty stuffy. So just be aware, London is not built for heat. And we were coming at the tail end of a heat wave. And we don't mind heat, but we're used to there being a little more air conditioning than there was. So just be aware. Let's see. We also did Hyde Park that day, which is a cool place to walk around. We did the Disney store that day. The interesting thing for me is they had a big sign advertising cruises as we walked in the Disney store, and they were playing that "Let Me Take You on a Sea Cruise" song, which isn't exactly a Disney song. It was clear they were pushing the cruises, but they have a lot of cool London merch. So the Disney store in London is worth a look.
Oh, yeah. They were really pushing the Disney cruises, and they had going on now, all of those, while we're recording this, all of those shorter Southampton cruises for locals, basically. So, yeah, that's why back in July and when I was there in June, they were really pushing those, showing all the merch and, getting people excited and hoping that they'll be interested in taking a cruise from Southampton.
Yeah, yeah. One tip I should probably give, we walked quite a bit in London, but we also took the tube quite a bit. I think Christy mentioned that they did that and it's quite easy to navigate. The apps do a good job. One tip for families, if you are, I believe it's under 11, you're free on the tube. If you are 15 to 11, you can get an Oyster card. So you can pay on the tube with a contactless credit card, just tap on, tap off. But you can also buy an Oyster card and load money onto it, which you can't share the same contactless credit card. We needed a way for my kids to pay. And so we bought in advance, and I think it's visitlondon.com. You can pre-order a Oyster card that they'll send you with money loaded onto it. We just did the default. I think it was £15, which was perfect for our 4 days in London. And when you get there, we had a super helpful tube employee because I was asking him, how do we go through the gates with my 9-year-old? And he's like, oh, this is how it works. But you've got teenagers, they look younger. You got Oyster cards. We can give you the young visitor discount. So if they're 11 to 15, they pay half price tube fare. And an employee can take that Oyster card, go over to the machine, and they put in their code and can give you the discount. And then they get discounted fares the whole time, which was awesome. So I do recommend an Oyster card for those who don't have a contactless credit card. So, teenagers and tweens. I do have kids that have debit cards, but you really don't want to use a debit card for that sort of thing. Especially, you want to make sure you don't have international transaction fees on your credit card if you're going to do it. But if you're an adult with a contactless credit card, it's great. Kids get an Oyster card. And if they're 11 to 15, get the discount. And then the tube is a great way to get around London in addition to walking.
It's a really good tip. And then just a note, I used Apple Maps for the most part to determine the different tube routes. And I know a lot of people talked about City Mapper as well. Yep. And it'll tell you how long it'll take, how to do the transfer. I mean, the directions are so easy. It is so easy to navigate.
It is. We did Google Maps. I had City Mapper downloaded, but I kept going into Google out of habit, and it worked great. My only complaint, and I don't know if Apple or City did a better job of this, was Google tended to prioritize not having you transfer lines. And so it would sometimes have us walk a little bit further. Not horrible, but like when it was raining one day, I was like, actually, I know if we transfer, we can get off at our normal station, but we're on a line that involves like a 2-block walk that Google wants us to take. I'm going to just transfer, go down another station and avoid the rain.
Yeah, it would give you all the different options. So you could just look to see if you wanted to walk more or take more trains or buses and trains, things like that on Apple. So that was nice.
Awesome. One other thing I'm kind of going through day by day in my mind, but trying to keep this from being a 2-hour-long episode. One of the highlights of the cruise the trip for us here in London, after our Hyde Park, we had a dinner booked. I wanted to do a British pub experience, and we ended up booking at the Sherlock Holmes, which was like right by our hotel. And I was a little worried it would be super touristy because it is kind of a themed pub. But as we walked up, every time we walked by there were a ton of people outside just standing there drinking, like enjoying the pub. So it seemed to be quite popular. We did have a reservation, though the dining room itself was not very full. But we really like the food there, and it's themed. It's got a whole Sherlock Holmes recreation of his study and kind of theme. And so it's kind of cool that way. I thought the food was quite good, maybe not the best, but it was solid food. And the sticky toffee pudding, if you go to a British pub, you absolutely have to try the dessert. So good. And then after that was one of the highlights of our activity. Somehow along during the pre-planning, my kids were like, we want to do a ghost tour. I think it came after we talked about the catacombs in Paris. And I did a little research and I ran across this site. It's theghostbustours.com, but they do ghost tours in a old Routemaster double-decker, the original Routemaster double-decker buses, only they painted them black. And it is kind of, the way I would describe it is if you think about the Jungle Cruise and a Jungle Cruise skipper, that kind of humor, but with a haunted mansion vibe, giving you a city tour. Though the city tour, it takes you around the city, but they're focusing on how people died, famous executions, famous murders. So it gets a little bit macabre maybe, but it was still family friendly and still humorous because they got the Jungle Cruise skipper humor. It was absolutely phenomenal experience. My teenagers absolutely loved it. And we saw a whole bunch of the city we wouldn't have seen otherwise. They take you on the bus and then they have you get off at a couple places. We got to see Pie Corner, which is where the London fire started. We got to see one of the old hospitals, got all sorts of stories. They get a little bit graphic about some of the, how some people were executed or died, but nothing that crossed the line for, my family. If you have really little kids, maybe that'd be a challenge. But for adults and teenagers, it was just phenomenal. And one of the best things we did, we picked up the bus literally right across the street from the pub. So it was super convenient and everyone really enjoyed the tour.
I think that sounds so cool. Well, you've got 2 more days here. Let's just real quick highlight these and then we will move on to Paris.
Sounds good. The next day was our Harry Potter day. Go back and listen to Dave and Blake's episode that Christy did for them, and you can get all the Harry Potter tips. Their tips are spot on. The only thing I will add is I did pre-book my tickets from Euston Station to Watford Junction, where you get off for the Harry Potter tour, and they have the shuttle buses. If you've got a larger group, if you pre-book and sign your time, you get a significant discount. So we booked what time we wanted to leave, but we had an open return, so we could come back whenever we were done. And it was, for a family, it was a really good deal to do it that way. There's just a few of you, you can just kind of do it on the fly. But if there's a group, pre-purchasing saves quite a bit of money. The next day was our last day in London. And we actually switched hotels on this day because I wanted to stay up closer to the train station before we took the Eurostar. But the first thing we did in the morning was my number one have to do in London, which was the Tower Bridge. For many years, I had the Tower of London and Tower Bridge confused in my mind and thought they were the same thing. They are not. They are right by each other, but the Tower of London is where, people were imprisoned and where the crown jewels and all that is. The Tower Bridge is literally just a bridge, but it is very iconic looking. And if you're like me, a fan of trains and bridges, it is really cool. It's also in Spider-Man Far From Home. That's how I got my teenagers excited to go. And anybody can walk across the bridge, but if you buy the tickets, you can go up to the second level and walk, and they have a transparent floor, which is cool. And then you can go through the whole engine room and see the original steam engines that used to raise the bridge. We lucked out. They were literally going to do a bridge raising as we walked up. We watched them close the road, but then they called us to go through security right as the road started to go up, so we missed that part. But it was still a really awesome experience. And then it's not too far. We walked from there to the Borough Market, which the Borough Market is really cool. It was super crowded because it was raining and it was a Saturday. And so we didn't stay for very long, but I had an awesome moment when I separated from my family for a minute to go grab something. And I found myself in the cheese aisle, and everyone wanted to give me samples of incredible cheese. And I kind of was looking like lost, trying to, where's my family? Oh, cheese, sure. I needed that moment for myself, and it was really, really cool cheese. And we did get the famous strawberries and chocolate that you'll see on the internet there, and they are really, really good. So Borough Market's cool. And then I do need to talk about a transportation hiccup we had real quick. We needed to transfer from our hotel we were going to stay at the St. Pancras, which is the beautiful historic hotel that's part of the St. Pancras train station. And it is an incredible hotel to stay at. It's not cheap, but we splurged on points. It was my wife's birthday, and it was super convenient for the train. And I intended to take a cab up there, and I kept ordering cabs, and they kept getting canceled. And I'm like, what's going on? And I asked my hotel clerk, and they were like, sometimes we have trouble getting hotel cabs. Why don't you walk up to the train station? There was a train station right by the hotel, and check the taxi stand there. Well, we walk up there and we realize why no cabs can get through. The road was closed for protest. There was this big protest parade going through, and our part of the city was isolated because of this protest, and clearly no cabs were going to get through. I didn't want to take luggage on the tube, but we walked into the train station. And I asked at the info desk, I was like, are there normal trains that we can get across London on? I had kind of thought they only went outside the city. And they're like, no, you can take a train from here to another station and switch and then end up at St. Pancras. So that's what we ended up doing. And we were able to use our tap-on cards for that. It was only like £3, so only a little more than tube fare. And that saved us and got us to where we needed to go. Afterwards, I was told on weekends in London, there are often road closures in the city. So be aware there's lots of ways to get around if a taxi doesn't work for you.
Well, then you head towards Paris and you have 2 days in Paris. How did you get there and what did you get up to?
Yeah, so we took the Eurostar from St. Pancras in London it goes to Gare du Nord in Paris. And it's an awesome train ride, by the way, only about 2.5 hours. Highly recommend if you're into trains. We only had 24 hours in Paris. So you can take that in the morning and then you can get on the afternoon train to Barcelona, which leaves out of another train station. But we just took the RER, which is not their subway, but it's like their regional train. It's just one stop between train stations. So it's doable to do that all in one connection. We decided, though, we wanted to have a little time in Paris. So we spent one night in Paris. We stayed at the courtyard that's right there by Gare de Lyon train station, which is where the TGV leaves to Barcelona. So we were close there. We got to the hotel. We did the 9:30, gets you in about 1 Paris time, and went to our hotel. Found the bakery around the corner. Most incredible French. I guess all the bakeries in France are probably incredible, but most incredible bakery. I ate there 4 times in 24 hours because I couldn't get enough of their pastries.
And what was your favorite pastry?
A raspberry croissant. Like, I have never had a raspberry croissant before. And if you get something raspberry in the States, it's questionable how good it would be. Oh, so phenomenal. But we also had sandwiches that my family loved. We had a breakfast sandwich there, and I had a chicken sandwich I took on the train. So highly recommend getting food at French bakeries. You don't need to go do some fancy sit-down restaurant in France. The food is good like almost everywhere, especially the bakeries. But in terms of activities in France, I did get tickets for the Eiffel Tower in advance. They're about 60 days out. They are hard to get. You got to use your Disney rope dropping skills to get tickets in advance. But we did get tickets for the Eiffel Tower. It's something my kids really wanted to do. They released the walking tickets to take the stairs like 2 weeks out. But if you want the elevator, it's 60 days out. And they release it it's midnight Paris time, I believe. So you got to go calculate the time difference and get on right away if you want to get tickets. The one other thing we did in Paris is we wanted to see Notre Dame. It is reopened. You can go inside. If you have tickets, it makes it easier. Those they release 2 days out at midnight at Paris time as of right now. So we had to stay up in London and get those tickets if we wanted them. They're also hard to get. Though the standby line for Notre Dame, if you go in the morning, didn't look too bad. But it was great to have tickets with our limited time. We walked right in. It is a cool experience to go inside Notre Dame if you have the opportunity. But after that, we headed on to Barcelona.
All right, Brian. So it's your big highlight. It's the train ride. How was it?
It was awesome. There is nothing like flying through the French countryside, and every little town has like an old medieval looking church in it. You're going along and you can see a castle in the distance up on the hill. That train route goes along the Mediterranean part of the time. It goes through the Pyrenees Mountains. I absolutely loved the train ride. I will say it is a little bit long. It was supposed to be 6 hours and 40 minutes, and we had some delays that made it more like 7.5 hours. And I feel like if it was a 5-hour or 6-hour train ride, it would be perfect. It got a little bit long towards the end, especially with the delays, but it is an awesome experience. And if you think about it, with travel time in these European cities where the airport's a ways outside the city, and then you got to deal with security and being there early and all that, I don't think you save that much time by flying at the end of the day. So if you want the experience, I think it's totally worth it. If you're just trying to get point to point fastest, a plane might be faster. The train prices, I don't know that we saved a ton of money. Train prices fluctuate just like plane prices. And I think I booked them as soon as I could because I just didn't know any better. And we maybe paid a little more than we needed to, but I absolutely love the train ride and would highly recommend it for anybody who likes that sort of experience.
Love it. Well, then we've got one more city, a personal favorite of my own, Barcelona. What did you get up to in the city?
Yeah, so we arrived late. We got around 10 o'clock at night. And so I had booked a hotel close to the train station, so it would be easy to get there. We stayed at the Moxie Barcelona by the Sants train station. It's a relatively new hotel, I believe. It is part of the Marriott family, but it is a very different hotel. And if you read the reviews, you will see that there is a lot of hating going on that hotel. And I'm just bringing it up because we loved it. It's great for families because they have 3-person rooms. We got 2 3-person rooms. And I liked it. It kind of has, if you think about in your mind, at least for me, what Virgin Voyages advertises as a brand, it kind of has that vibe in the hotel. They're big on their common space, as one of the nicest common spaces I've seen in a hotel, and this fancy pool deck. But the rooms are very, very utilitarian. Not really any storage, basic beds, that sort of thing. But we liked it, and I think it was an affordable option. The food there was very good. They were really nice when we checked in. The kitchen was technically closed, but it had just closed, and my kids were starving. And they went back there and were like, well, what can you get? And they gave us a few menu options so we could feed my kids. So excellent service. Definitely think it's worth considering, but it is different, so you have to be okay with that. But we loved it. It's a great location too. In terms of activities in Barcelona, this was one place I wanted a little help seeing the city, so we went on tours by locals. And I found a tour guide, Anna. Shout out to Anna P on Tours by Local. She was an awesome local tour guide. We did a tapas and food tour our first day there. That was phenomenal. She took us to some great food, took us around the city, took us to the market. She adapted to my kids' interests. She took us to this really unique shopping area that had like a Harry Potter store in Barcelona and like a game store and some just very different things. It was really cool. Really loved the tour, and it was great to understand a little bit of the city. She gave us history and culture. At one point, she found out my wife was a big reader, so she took us to a bookstore and found a book that had been written about the area we were exploring and got us an English copy and said, this is one of my favorite books, and it's about Barcelona, and it's in the genre that my wife would like. So that was really cool. Souvenir from my wife. So can't recommend enough looking at getting a local tour guide in cities like this. And Anna on Tours by Local was awesome for Barcelona. The next day, we did La Sagrada Familia, which is an absolute must-do and a highlight in Barcelona. And we had her give us a tour as well, which meant she took care of getting the tickets for us. And you can do that on your own, but it is a little bit tricky to get tickets. She took care of that. And then I feel like a tour guide there really enhances the experience. We didn't book a very long tour with her. It was only like an hour and a half, 2-hour tour, which is about as much as my kids could handle there. But it was really nice to have her point things out to us. And it is just a beautiful, amazing cathedral. If you're not familiar with the Sagrada Familia, go look at the photos online. It's even better in person. And then she gave us a great restaurant recommendation at the end. So we were really happy with her service as a tour guide. After that, that was my son's birthday. We went down to Montjuic and took the cable car up to see the views at the castle at the top, which you can see the port, you can see around the city. And one of the best things is you can look back across the city and see La Sagrada Familia and realize how big it is compared to the rest of the city. You know, you're there and you're in the city and you think, oh, it's big, but there are big buildings around. You go across the city and you look back and you realize just how big it is. It's really cool. And then after that, we went down to the Poble Español, which is a leftover from the 1929 World's Fair. If you think about Epcot World's Showcase, but showcasing the areas of Spain, that's what it was built to do, is show all the different areas of Spain and their architecture. And now it's like an artist village where all these artists have their workshops and there's restaurants and there's shopping. And a lot of the artists have crafts you can do. So you can pay and work with them in their workshop to do some sort of a craft activity. The one we wanted to do, she wasn't in that day, but the shop owner across the way was watching her shop and he saw us. He's like, oh, she's got take-home kits. So we took home these take-home kits to do tile mosaics at home. And it was a really cool way to remember Barcelona and a really cool thing. And we found out about this actually from Anna on our tour guide had mentioned it in one of the emails we had communicating ahead of time. And it was a great tip. The other thing there that we did is they have a flamenco show at the Tableau del Carmen. It's an old flamenco show. I think it started back during the World's Fair, so it's been around for a while. It's a dinner event. It's a little pricey. It's on the order of character dining at Disney World, but you get to eat. The food is pretty good. It's kind of like Disney Cruise Line MDR, main dining room food. It's mass produced, but it's decent. And you get to watch this flamenco show, which was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. We're a musical family. I didn't know much about flamenco. It is really unique because it's kind of a combination of tap or Irish step dance looking stuff. So they're up there stomping their feet and moving that way with guitars and a lot of clapping. And so just the music style is kind of unique, but it was really cool. And we really enjoyed that dinner and show experience.
Well, we've spent nearly 10 days in Europe and we still have a 7-night cruise to get into. So how did you get to the Barcelona port and what was it like getting onto the Fantasy for your European sailing?
Yeah, it was kind of amazing to us. We're like, we've just had this incredible vacation and now we're going to go get on a Disney cruise. It was pretty cool. We decided to take 2 cabs to the airport. We couldn't fit in one. There was a taxi stand outside our hotel and we just took cabs to the airport. It was one of the few cab rides we took in Europe. You can do public transportation to the port, but it's not super convenient and with luggage. Cab ride was super easy and not very expensive. Getting on the Disney Fantasy, man, after being all over Europe and different experiences, it felt like coming home. We came on board, we smelled the smells, we saw the lobby, and it's like, oh, we're home, but we're still in a foreign country. This is cool. And so we were very much excited to get on board and relax. We'd been looking forward to the beds and the sheets on the Fantasy because, not gonna lie, the bedding quality on a lot of our hotels was not up to par with Disney. So we were really excited for that. But yeah, we got on board. We had our embarkation day lunch. Embarkation was super easy in Barcelona for us. I felt like they were making sure people stuck to their port arrival time. We arrived like just minutes after ours, so we basically got to walk on. One call out for this cruise, because we were leaving the EU, we had to go through immigration on our way out. So we had to stop by and have our passports actually stamped, which is kind of cool. I have a cruise stamp on my passport from Barcelona that has a little ship on it on the stamp logo, which was kind of cool. But it didn't slow embarkation down. We felt like it was one of the fastest arrive at the port to get on the ship experiences we've ever had, which was cool.
Yeah, Barcelona tends to have a pretty solid port experience. They've invested pretty heavily in their cruise port terminals. Well, you get on board the Fantasy, not your first rodeo on board the ship, but your first time in Europe, and you have 2 sea days to start. Did you guys just like melt into your chairs for those 2 days?
Yeah, so sea day 1, I woke up not feeling great. I had my sinuses got irritated by something I walked through in Paris, and it was catching up with me. My wife and I had Palo brunch booked, and we went and did Palo brunch first thing in the morning. But then I napped on deck 4 because our stateroom attendant was cleaning our stateroom. Then I moved down to our stateroom and napped in the stateroom. We were pretty exhausted. And then I'll give a little shout out. I think if you sail during COVID, you're a little nervous about the idea of doing this, but I was like, I'm worried I'm getting a sinus infection. Something's really going on with my sinuses after I woke up. And so I went down to the medical center and I'm like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but my sinuses feel like I've got an infection. And the doctor saw me and he's like, oh, your ears are clogged, but you don't have an infection. Here's some eardrops and here's a nose spray, and this will help you feel better. And I'm really glad I went down there because it made me feel a lot better. But you do have to pay. They just bill it to your stateroom. I didn't think the price was any more than, if you pay back in the States. But we have travel insurance. I always recommend travel insurance, and they reimbursed me for it. I got the approval notification just like a few days ago. So it wasn't a big deal. But, we don't talk about that much, but the medical center is there to help you. They're not trying to just lock you in your stateroom or something like that if you go down there, and they will try and help make sure you can enjoy your vacation. So that was a little tip I'll give.
What stateroom did you book, and how did that work for your family? Or staterooms, I should say.
So this was all about getting on the boat for us. And so we had adjoining or connecting ocean view staterooms on deck 2. And interestingly enough, we had the exact same staterooms we were in on our triple jip cruise on the Fantasy the previous October. In fact, my kids had hidden something up in a place to see how well Disney cleaned, to see if it would still be there. And it was not there. They had cleaned up there. We complimented the housekeeping staff. But yeah, we liked the rooms. Deck 2 has some advantages because you're close to all the evening activities and restaurants and things in the evening. It's easy to go back and forth to the room. It's just a bit of a haul to get up to the pool deck. But we were absolutely happy with our ocean view rooms, especially because it's got the big porthole you can kind of lay in. Veranda would be nice on this itinerary because of the incredible sail ins and sail aways. I'm not going to lie. But the loungers on deck 4 are very comfortable. So if an ocean view is what you can do, it totally works out. And I have to give a shout out to our stateroom attendant, Cade. I think he was the best stateroom attendant we have ever had. He was phenomenal. But yeah, sea day number 2, I didn't sleep quite as much, but we did do the Goofy Sports Simulator. That was something we booked in advance and had never done before. For those who aren't familiar, it's kind of like a giant projection, like Wii Sports sort of thing. They have a bunch of different games you can do, and you can throw balls or kick balls, and they like monitor how it goes. And it's kind of like one of those, virtual sports simulators. The technology, has advanced a lot, but it's still pretty cool because while you can do similar things maybe on your game system at home now, you don't have the big projection screen and the full-size balls, and they have a net so that it's safe, and it was really fun. The other side of it is golf simulator. We did the generic sports one, and they have like 8 different games you can play, most of which have slight variations. So that was a fun thing we did that sea day. And then the other thing I did that sea day I want to call out is the Art of the Theme Show tour. If you have never done that, I've done it a few times, and I debated do I want to just sit on deck 4 and enjoy the scenery, or am I going to go do this tour? I did sit on deck 4 some, but I am so glad I did the tour. We had the best host ever. Shout out to Emmy. She was incredible. She happened to be the evening adult space host, and I think she didn't normally do the Art of the Theme Show tour anymore, but she was doing it that time. And one of the supervisors was watching, and I told her, this is the best Art of the Theme Show tour I've ever been on. She was hilarious. It felt like professional stand-up comedy while you're walking around the Disney ship, getting unique facts that I hadn't heard before, and just having a great tour. It was one of the funnest things I've ever done on a Disney cruise ship. You know, your experience may vary on that, but the Art of the Theme Show tour could be really, really fun.
And did your kids go to the youth spaces on those sea days?
They did. My oldest is going to be aging out of Vibe fairly soon. In fact, she thought this was going to be her last cruise that she could go to Vibe. And so she went down there to kind of like have a last hurrah, ended up finding a great group of friends, and just, we didn't see her a lot. She hung out with her friends in Vibe most of the time. My youngest knew he's getting close to aging out of the kids club, so he went down and spent some time in the kids club. Not a ton, but he spent some good chunks of time and had a good time on it. My two middle kids did not spend any time. Nobody wanted to try out Edge this time. There were other things they wanted to do, and they have never been real big kids club fans. So my advice is, you know, especially on these longer cruises, go early so you can try and find your friend group. That helps a lot. But, you know, your mileage may vary with your kids on how much they like the kids spaces.
So with your daughter in the Vibe, did they actually have activities that she participated in, or did she just meet people and then they hung out and talked and stuff like that?
Both. I think some of the connections she made was she went to karaoke there. She's very musically inclined, loves to sing, and she bonded with another girl who sang karaoke with her. I don't know if they sang a duet, but they sang the karaoke thing. So I know they did that. I know there was some organized events. She specifically told us, oh, I got to go back to Vibe for this. But I think there was also a lot of hanging out around the ship as well. So I think a mix of both.
Okay. And we're going to have her on, but it's going to take us a minute to be able to record with her for all of our schedules. But we have already discussed that that's going to happen. So we will have an episode about it. Just something to look forward to in the future.
So you've done several Bohemian Caribbean sailings, even on the Fantasy, but your first European sailing. How did you feel like the general sailing experience differed from like a regular Caribbean cruise out of Florida?
Yeah, I mean, the first most obvious thing is the scenery is very different. And we should talk about a few of those highlights in a minute, because there was a unique experience, a couple unique sailing experiences with really cool things to see on this sailing. But one thing to be aware of, food is different a little bit. Like they have the same menus, but some of the food is different. Like the first night I wanted horseradish, and it was not the horseradish I'm used to from the US. It was fine. But a couple of years ago, there was a big deal made about how the chicken tenders are different. They are different. We liked them okay. We thought the chicken tenders on the pool deck were better than the ones in cabanas, but both were different from the traditional ones you get here. The honey mustard sauce is the same though, which is the only reason I have chicken tenders is to enjoy the sauce. So that was all good. I felt like the soda machines had different soda. So they had like the European version of Coke Zero, which I think I like a little bit better for a bunch of the sailing. They didn't have ginger ale, which you normally see. They had Sprite Zero, which I haven't seen before. And so there was no Powerade, which my kids were a little disappointed on. So you can see some different supply issues. And I don't know how much of that was just this sailing versus just that's the way it is in Europe. But there were little things like that were different. Another big difference is we had a much more international group. And I saw this in the Facebook group in advance. I mentioned that you've got a lot more people from different places on board. You do have unique merchandise. There was some really cool European merchandise on board, t-shirts. I got a cool tumbler I liked. Yeah, it is a different experience. But like I said, you still feel like you're kind of at home. So if you've done some of the sailing, you're kind of like, my kids were kind of like, you know, we've explored Europe, and it's kind of nice to be back to something that feels familiar, even though it is different.
Yeah, it's nice to be out and exploring new places, but having this very familiar home base to go back to at the end of the day.
For sure. One thing we should maybe talk about that I did miss, because this would have been the second sea day that we did this, is the night before the captain warned us we would be sailing through the Strait of Gibraltar starting at 6 a.m. our second sea day. And this is one of the highlights of this itinerary is you get to sail past the Rock of Gibraltar, and they even had photographers down on deck 4 that would take your picture with the rock in the background. We started up on the top deck taking pictures, but I think their cameras did a better job. It was a little foggy because it was early in the morning, which made the views a little bit trickier to see, but it was really cool to think I'm sailing past the Strait of Gibraltar. I'm sailing past the famous rock. I can see Africa over in the distance, and I can see Europe on the other side. It's a couple hour experience. You do have to get up early, but it was so worth it and one of the unique highlights of this cruise.
That's so fascinating and unique. I love that so much. Well, any other notes on sailing on the Fantasy before we once again disembark and get into some incredible ports?
I really liked our captain and our cruise director on this sailing. And now that I say that, I'm going to forget what their names were. I think it was Captain Wesley was our captain, if I remember right. And our cruise director was Jimmy, now I'm remembering. And they were both awesome. I haven't had either of them on the Fantasy before. And we did see some familiar staff from our last Fantasy sailing. The hotel director was the same one I made friends with last time. You can hear about that on the prior episode, and she remembered me. That was fun. But those two are great cruise director, great captain. Really enjoyed hearing from them on the cruise.
Yeah, Brian, you always do such a great job, not only highlighting cast members, but making really great connections with the cast and crew on board. Well, let's go ahead and jump into these unique cruise ports. Your first stop is in Lisbon. How was that?
Lisbon was another highlight of the cruise, and not for the reason you might think. Lisbon is probably the most incredible sail-in I have ever experienced in my life. Like, the star of Lisbon is sailing in. You go up I think it's the Tagus River, and you go under the 25th of April Bridge, which is very similar to the Golden Gate Bridge, designed by the same people. And right just on the other side of the bridge up on the hill, they have Christ the King statue. It's similar to Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio that you may have seen or heard of. Giant Christus statue with his arms wide open. And we hit this just as the sun was coming up and had the most amazing sunrise as we were sailing in. We did have to get up early. I think we were up around 6:30. They told us when the sailing would be, but it was so worth it. I have never seen such an incredible sunrise with such incredible scenery. And then you sail up the river for a little while, and all the buildings along the side are amazing. We got shots after we sailed under the bridge, looking backwards to the funnel with the bridge in the background. It was just like this magical moment. And after I had a little bit of that, I went down on deck 4 and I ran laps. I did a 5K while we were pulling the rest of the way in. So I'm getting to watch the scenery as we go down. And it's a river, so there's scenery on both sides. So it's a great time to run laps on deck. That sail in for Lisbon is like one of the most incredible things. And I think one of the saddest things is that Disney just doesn't go to Lisbon very often. But that sail-in was worth the entire cruise.
And we haven't even gotten onto land yet.
That sounds amazing.
It really was. For Lisbon, originally my plan was to just get off the ship and wander around because there's a lot to see. One of the awesome things about this itinerary is every city you dock downtown and you can walk off the ship and you are in the city and can explore. It isn't like some of the Mediterranean ports where there's a bus ride or a train ride to get to the main attraction, which was really cool. And one of the nice things they did is they had PhotoPass photographers as you got off the ship that would take your picture with the city in the background. I joked with them. Some of them looked like you were standing in front of their backgrounds in the atrium because they were just so unreal. The backdrop for these photos as you're getting off the ship. It was really cool. But for Lisbon, what we ended up doing is I ended up finding out a popular thing there is they do these tuk-tuk tours with these electric tuk-tuks because it's a very hilly city with narrow roads. And I found this website. I took a tuk-tuk.com, small family-owned business that really tried to have the tuk-tuk tours and do them right. There are like unlicensed and uninsured tuk-tuk tours and all sorts of things like that there going on. But this is a legit company with insurance and with good guides and all that. And we booked through them. And we had just the most amazing tour. Our tour guide, Savio, was phenomenal. He did a great job of adapting the tour to what my kids and my family were interested in. And he took us over. He did some really unique things. He was an incredible photographer. So he took us, one of the first things we did is this outlook where you could look out and you could see the bridge. You could see this castle on a hill. You could see the Lisbon skyline. And he took some great pictures of our family. And we have had a picture above, like we did like the canvas photo print above my mantle since our first cruise. It was the dolphin encounter we had on our very first Disney cruise. And we have not displaced it in like 5 years, even though the kids have grown, because we love the picture so much. We got home and my wife replaced it with one of the pictures he took with this incredible view because it was just so phenomenal. And it finally was worthy of displacing our first cruise photo. And then he was explaining about the history and a lot about the revolution that happened in Portugal, which is where the 25th of April bridge name comes from. It was from the revolution on the 25th of April where they got rid of their dictator. He took us to one of the historic sites that has like an honor guard. Think kind of like a smaller scale version of the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. He took us there to watch the changing of the guard. It was a fairly simplified version, but then he went up and got us to be able to take a picture with the guard, which was really cool. He took us, one of the big things in Portugal is the pastel de nata, which was originally called pastel de Belém. There are these little pastries, and pastel de Belém's like the trademark name that you can only get if you go to the original place they baked them. He took us there and was able to get us some without having to wait in a long line. We originally were just each going to try one, and then we're like, we got to try more than these because they are so delicious, and highly recommend eating those. And it was just a phenomenal tour. It was like a 4-hour tour and absolutely worth it. And I'm so glad that we booked that with him.
Love it. Well, let's move into your next day. You were in Vigo. How was that?
Vigo was one of the days I decided not to book anything. There weren't any Disney excursions that really interested me, and researching, it seemed like a lot of people just walk around the city. So that's what we did. We got off, and it's a very hilly city. We walked up the hill. We found kind of like this port park. It was like at this old abandoned fortress, and we took some pictures with the kids, and then they were kind of done. We did a little bit of shopping, and they went and got back on board. I ended up going back out again for a second round of shopping, and we did get a little bit of gelato when we went back with the kids, but it wasn't like the highly rated place. When I went back out, the highly rated place was open. And so I went and got this artisanal gelato that was phenomenal. They had like this apple flavor, and I can't remember the other flavor I got, but just phenomenal gelato. So, and then I went shopping. I went to a local clothing store that was kind of like the local, had the vibe of this is the local hip teen brand place to go shopping. Kind of like, I don't know, maybe I'm going to date myself by saying like the Gap or something like that, because I don't even know if they're around anymore. And I got myself a souvenir t-shirt there. Like, I'm a middle-aged dad. I can still go in and get a cool t-shirt because it was local themed, and it had in Vigo, you're in Galicia, and they have their own Galician language in addition to Spanish. And so it had Galician words on it, and it's a cool t-shirt. So I did that. And then I went back to the ship, and there was a little park right next to the ship. And I was kind of wandering around there. And this park was like a memorial to the fact that Vigo is a central place in the transatlantic telegraph service back in the day when we had transatlantic telegraph cables, and they had main offices for the telegraph companies here because of its role in maintaining and how the telegraph cables ran. And they had a bunch of little plaques. It was plaques around there. It was just one of those little hidden random things you see. And I thought it was a fascinating read to walk around and read all the history of that. So that was Vigo.
Quick general question, just because you mentioned it with this port. As we said, these are not ports that Disney cruises to very often. Did you find that the Disney supplied excursions felt more limited than, say, some of the other places you've sailed to?
They had a lot of options. My complaint was that most of them involved leaving the area. And so I knew they were going to involve bus rides, or like Vigo, there's a couple places people like to go, but it's a ways outside the city. And I was like, I don't want to do that. They did have a few, especially in Lisbon, there were quite a good variety. So I think there were options. For us, it's, the Disney excursions, sometimes they have age restrictions that you won't have if you book outside. A lot of times they're more expensive. And just for my family, we didn't want to go on a big group tour. Like, that just wasn't quite the right fit. We had long times in port. Lisbon was like 8 to 6, I think. Vigo, we didn't get in until 11. We got to sleep in a little bit. There was also a time change from Lisbon to Vigo. That's one thing on this itinerary. Spain's on one time zone. Portugal and the UK are on another. So we went back and forth an hour a couple times during this sailing. But it was like 11 a.m. to like 7 or 8 at night for Vigo. So you got long port days. These are places, like I said, if you don't take a bus a long way around, you're right in the city. So I never had concerns about getting back to the ship. I'm like, if something goes wrong on my tour, like, we're almost always in walking or public transit or a quick cab ride back to the ship. So as long as you give yourself some time, you don't really have to be worried about getting back, unless you wanted to go and do because I think one of the big things along here is there's a pilgrimage to, I can't remember, Santiago de something or other pilgrimage site that a lot of people wanted to go see. And I think that was a little bit of a bus ride. So if you're going to do something like that where you're traveling a ways, you might want to do a Disney excursion to make sure you can get back and don't miss the boat. But there's a lot of options that don't involve a lot of risk because these ports are right at the city.
Love it. Well, you've got one more port stop to discuss. Love Coruña?
Yeah. So this one was a fun one. We did two things here. First thing in the morning, we got off the ship and I realized it was a 15-minute walk to a beach. And so my kids like the beach. We walked over to the beach. It's North Atlantic, so the water's a little cold, but it was a beautiful little beach and we had a little bit of fun. There was a ton of sea glass on the beach and we enjoyed that. The facilities were a little bit primitive. They had not the greatest bathroom facilities, but they were there. And there was a little shower facility, just a little bit of a walk, but we enjoyed the beach in the morning and then we walked back. And that afternoon I had booked a Segway tour at the Tower of Hercules. And now this is an old lighthouse that was originally built in Roman times, hence the name, but it got remodeled in like the 1800s. And I think it's the world's oldest or Europe's oldest still operating lighthouse. And it's this scenic point with awesome ocean views. And then you've got this historic lighthouse. And I had run across this Segway tour on Viator. I don't remember how, but we ended up booking that. I originally booked a time and then they emailed me right before the booking window opened and said, hey, there's a Disney ship in town and they need that time slot for their shore excursion. So I got to move your time. And I was like, okay. And I went and looked, oh, sure enough, Disney has a port excursion, but my kids aren't old enough, one of them, to go on it. And it's going to cost a whole lot more money. And so we'll just do the other time with this guy. And let me tell you, it was one of my favorite port adventures we've ever done. I had never read a Segway before, but the guide took time to make sure each of us was comfortable and safe before we went on the tour. It was kind of like, even it wasn't included in our tour time. Like there was a pre-time and he's like, oh, you're a big group, come a little bit earlier so I can make sure you guys all know how to ride them. And then we rode around and saw this incredible scenery while he's telling us the history of this place, both the original like ancient history, and there had been an oil tanker that ran aground there like 20 years ago and had this huge ecological disaster. And he was telling us about it and what they had done to preserve it and how this all became a kind of a preserve because of that. And you could tell he was really enthusiastic to share the history of where he lived, both the ancient and the modern. And it was just this phenomenal tour. It was so fun to ride the Segways and took us around to several photo ops, gave us a bunch of history. Like I didn't realize that the people from that area in Spain have the same descendants as the Gaelic people that you think about up in Ireland and Scotland. They all came from the same group. In fact, there was like a little memorial there to a guy whose brother was the one who like supposedly sailed up to Scotland and Ireland to settle up there. And so it was an interesting little bit of history. They have bagpipes and stuff in that part of Spain. So it was fascinating to learn all that and just one of the funnest things I've ever done.
How did your 9-year-old do on the Segway?
He was awesome. He was 10 by that point.
Oh, right. Yes, he had his birthday.
No, he did well. We all did quite well. The Segways have adjustable like height things. And, he made sure everybody knew how to stop. That was one of the most important things he trained people on, and how to turn. And he gave us all a big safety briefing and we went on a long line. I was at the very end and everybody else was kind of line of ducks and it went really well. I told my wife afterwards, I want to buy a Segway, and the guy had heard and he's like, I'm sorry to tell you, they don't manufacture them anymore.
Oh,
The companies around, they do like electric scooters and e-bikes, but the Segway that we all think of is no longer being manufactured. So if you want to do a Segway tour, do it now, because at some point they're going to not be able to maintain them anymore and it's not going to be an option.
well, it's awesome that you found it.
So yeah, it was really cool.
Well, sadly, you stop one more place, Southampton, your disembarkation. What was that process like and how did you navigate getting home?
Yeah. Real quick, we did have one more sea day. And the important call out on that sea day is because you're going from Barcelona to Southampton, there's an immigration thing, and they put the immigration officials on board and have you go through immigration on board. So they put a thing in our room. There was a time slot for each deck assigned, or you could go first thing in the morning to open time. And so we dropped at like 7:30 in the morning and went down because we didn't want to interrupt our day. There was a little bit, it's Disney, so there was a little bit of a line, but it went fast. And I think if you had waited 15 minutes, there would have been no line in the morning. But we went on, got it done. It was quick and painless. It took a look at our passports, but I will call that out. That is something about this cruise. And then, we got one last sea day. Arriving in Southampton, though, that means you don't have to go through immigration or anything. And we did the express walk-off, and it was super easy. We did go up to Cabanas for breakfast. We had to say goodnight to our servers the night before. We had Amy from the UK and I'm not going to remember his name, but a server from Brazil, and they were awesome. I'm going to give a quick memorable cast member interaction. I know you ask it, but while I'm thinking about it, our assistant server from Brazil, a lot of servers will do like magic trips or puzzles, but what he did is he makes these like paper flowers with his mom when he's off contract. It's a way for him to spend time with his mom, and he makes hundreds of these paper flowers. And he gave a little bouquet of these red paper roses for us one night. And my kids had gone off to do things, and my wife and I went and took photos at the photo places with this bouquet of flowers, and the photographers like made it a star of the show, like worked it into the story and had me like down on one knee with the flowers with my wife. We took all these really cool couple photos with the flowers from our assistant server. It was one of the coolest things I've ever had happen through an assistant server. So he was just awesome. And now I'm kicking myself that I can't remember his name. I'll remember it in like 5 minutes, but just an awesome experience.
I love that. So did you buy the photo package for your family then?
Of course, we always buy the photo package. And it was so worth it in Europe. Like they had so many extra photos. Like every port, you could get a picture either on deck 4 or just off of the ship as you're leaving. They take pictures with the cool backgrounds. I did see Disney groups going around like the port excursions in several occasions with a photographer with them. They don't do it on all of them, but they do it on some of them. And so, yeah, photo package.
Somebody else just reported this. So yeah, now there are photographers sometimes, Disney photographers in the cities. And it's sometimes with port excursions and sometimes they're just in the city. Like somebody reported that in Hanya, which is the Crete spot port, that over by the water edge, there were Disney PhotoPass photographers. Well, whatever the cruise ones are called. But so if you have your photo package, you can get it. That is so cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. Really cool. But we kind of veered off of Lake's question of getting off the ship, but it was easy. I will call, you've called it out several times, Christy. They don't really advertise that you can go eat at Cabanas for breakfast, but you can if you need to eat quickly and don't want to do your breakfast time. Then we got right off the ship. It was super easy, no immigration or anything. And we had booked a transfer through Project Expedition, and we wanted to try, Southampton's only about an hour from Stonehenge, and we wanted to swing by Stonehenge and then go to the airport. We had a later afternoon flight. And so we did that, our ride to Stonehenge. We had booked the transfer for 8 a.m., but we were off the ship closer to like 7:40. And so we had a little bit of a wait for him to show up. But we got to Stonehenge at 9. They didn't open until 9:30. Buy your tickets online in advance. We did it as we were driving over there because we had forgotten to. You save money buying them in advance. But when they opened at 9:30, we took the shuttle bus to the site, got to walk around and see it. It's really kind of cool to see the stones, but especially first thing in the morning because you can get some pictures without people behind you because they haven't all walked around. Like normally, like I think it's totally surrounded with people. So we got some cool photos and then went back, had a couple of minutes in the gift shop and then had to take off because we had to make it to our flight. But you really don't need very long there. There's more you can do with a museum and stuff, but if you only have an hour, I think we spent about an hour there. You can have a memorable experience.
What I'm learning from this show is whether it is the most mundane thing in the world or the most exciting thing, Bryan will be the rope drop king.
Yeah.
And will be there right at opening. Doesn't matter if it's paperwork or an exciting attraction. First in line.
Yeah, we've kind of gotten into that Disney culture rope drop thing, which is not always a good thing, I suppose, but it works.
Well, Bryan, you have such an incredible trip, an incredible itinerary. What would you say between both the cruise and pre-trip? What were your like top 3 highlight items that you did on this trip?
I think we hit on them. The Ghost Bus tour in London was phenomenal. Oh, I went for a 5K run along the River Thames. I didn't talk about that one morning in London. That was really cool. Also did a run in Barcelona. That was really cool. So being able to say I've run in Lisbon, Barcelona, and London is pretty cool. We just absolutely loved Barcelona. I think I hit on the big highlights with the flamenco show and the Sagrada Familia, but one random thing, the one thing I forgot on this cruise was my swimsuit, if you can believe it. And I told my family, I'm like, oh, we did go to the beach briefly in Barcelona to put our feet in the water there. We didn't really have a beach day, but we walked along the water and that was really cool. But I knew I kind of wanted to ride the aqueduct on the ship. And so one evening after everything else, I went and headed out I did a little research to the Spanish equivalent of Walmart and ended up a little bit more in the suburbs of Barcelona. I took the subway out there and I'm walking and I realized like this is where the people live, and walking through some outdoor dining restaurants where they're there and the kids are playing soccer in the little patio square. And I'm going through this and that was kind of a unique experience to get kind of out of the city. And then I went to the Walmart equivalent, and it was €5, I think, for my swimsuit. I was like, this is a good deal. Like, I don't mind this. And it was a cool one. I was like, I will wear this back home. Much less expensive than trying to get one on the ship. But that was kind of a odd, unexpected, fun little moment that I'll share. If you can get off the beaten path a little bit and also see how the people live in Europe, it's worth it.
What is one tip you would give for a family, or especially a larger family, trying to plan their first European trip?
Oh boy, I did get this tip, and I'll reiterate. I think Chad shared it from his thing, where you don't want to overschedule yourself. Make sure you give your kids some downtime, because it is a lot. The other thing I would say is, if you've got teenagers, figure out how you want to handle their cell phone plans. We have Verizon, and we did the travel perk thing where you could sign up and pay $10 a month and get 3 travel pass days, and you can bank those. And I did that for my wife and I, thinking we need cell phone service. My kids, I don't need cell phone service. And it worked really well for us. Like, we didn't have to deal with any complexities. It was just our normal number and everything. But I realized my kids really, a few times, really were like, I want to text my friends back home. And, we ended up paying for some travel pass days for them. I had thought about doing an eSIM, but you don't get your actual phone number, so they didn't have a way to text their friends. And so I wish I had signed up in advance and banked days and planned that a little better, instead of just assuming I can tell my teenagers, no, you can't have your phones. Because it was helpful for them when they were, not liking what we were doing, which happens with a family. Like, somebody's not going to like one of the activities you do. And so that was one thing I walked away going, I wish I had done that differently. And planned that a little bit better. The other thing is, don't be afraid to take public transit. We took subway in London, Paris, and Barcelona, almost everywhere, and it was great. No problems. I'm giving you more than one tip. The last tip I'm going to give, I did hear a lot about people being nervous about pickpockets, which probably is a very real concern. We never felt unsafe, but we did have, all my kids had on their bags, we got the little travel locks that you can get, little combo locks, and they locked their zippers together so that they didn't have to worry about someone trying to get their hands in their backpack without them noticing. That made us just feel more comfortable and made us a less easy target. And then we had no problems and never felt nervous about it on the trip.
Love it. That's all great information. You have me logging into my cell phone plan to be like, oh, I need to check my European coverage. Go ahead.
I want to go, though, to this itinerary. Like, I need to go to these cities. I love the fact that they're all just like right there and conveniently located, and you can walk around, and I just love that.
Pretty cool. They do have sailings from Southampton that stop at La Coruña and Vigo. They're kind of some of their shorter sailings when they reposition the ship. So getting to Vigo and La Coruña on Disney is not as hard as Lisbon, but I think Lisbon is transatlantic, or this repositioning cruise have historically been the only times you can get there. And it was I love La Coruña too, but Lisbon is an incredible port.
All your favorite children now.
Love it. Well, Bryan, last question I have. What is next for you?
Yeah. Oh, can I give you one other last thing? I got to talk about, I was sitting on deck 4 waiting to sail away. And at these cities, a lot of people come to wave goodbye to the Disney characters. And the Disney characters come out on deck 4 and wave to the people. It's really kind of cool. And Donald came out. And then
Your favorite.
Donald came out in his Spanish outfit. And I got some one-on-one time, little photo with Donald without having to wait in line as he was waving to all his fans on the shore. Minnie was also out, and Goofy came out. But that is a cool thing. It is kind of cool. They don't see Disney ships all that often, and so there was a crowd of locals out to wave to the characters, and the characters come out, and I thought that was a nice little touch.
I do have a question, though. The waving and the character just made me think of it. With the photo pass, because you're in 2 cabins, do you just go to the photo desk and tell them that you're the same nuclear family, and they will allow both rooms to be under one package?
Yes. You go there and you link them. The other thing we do, and we just always done this, is we always scan both rooms' key cards when they take the picture. I don't know if that's still strictly necessary. We link them, but we always do that. And I always go talk to them and link them, and it's never a problem.
Perfect.
Well, Bryan, what is next for you and your family?
Yeah, so we've been on this bucket list check off for the last couple of cruises. So what was supposed to be next is Alaska on the Magic in June of 2026. But I came home and there was an opportunity that came up. And so I've always wanted to kind of book a last minute cruise because we always book them like opening day. So we're actually going to go on the Wish over fall break because the opportunity presented itself, and I said, why not? So our next thing is 4-night on the Wish in October that we're super excited for. It'll be our first time on the Wish class ships. And then we have Alaska in June. And itineraries dropped today, so I have a funny feeling we're going to figure something out, maybe a merry time for December of 2026, because I have a cruise problem, and Christy's a great enabler, and this podcast is a great enabler, but we're kind of in this era. This is part of why we did this trip. My kids are getting older. My oldest is going to be a senior this year and graduate, and I just don't know how many opportunities we have to take family vacations all together. And so we're trying to enjoy that as we can. It was incredible to see Europe as a family. Like, that is something, there were so many little magical family moments for us on this trip. And I am so glad we made the investment. It was an investment, but it is so worth it.
Well, I think that's the perfect ending to the show.
Well, we hope once again, after your next couple sailings, that you will come on and share your experiences. We always appreciate all your insight and details you give, Bryan. And thank you again for, as always, supporting the show as well.
You are welcome. This has been such an inspirational podcast. I know you're going to be hitting episode 500 here shortly, if you haven't before this one airs. And it has really made a difference in our travel and the community and the friendships I've made. And just thank you again, both, for creating this awesome community with so much good information and such a supportive group. And I, love listening to the podcast between cruises. It's phenomenal.
Thank you, Bryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. Well, Christy, where can our listeners follow you?
You can find me all over the internet at Pack Your Pixie Dust. And if you'd like to work with me, Lake has made a Contact Christy link in the show notes, and you can check that out, or you can go to my website, packyourpixiedust.com. Lake, where can we find you?
You can find me on YouTube and Instagram at MouseGen, and you can follow the podcast at DCL Podcast on Facebook or Instagram. And of course, find out more information at our website at dclpodcast.com. But that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Well, that's going to wrap up the show. Once again, we want to thank Bryan for coming on and sharing his family's adventures through Europe. If you're enjoying the show, we greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'd also like to thank our Patreons who help make the show happen each and every week for us. You too can help support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/DCLpodcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or adventuring outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Christy, and Steve, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels. And we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.